Hi guys, this is Nia and today I will be painting a fox as requested by Charity Goza. This is an illustrative approach. As usual, I'm really not the best at animal painting, so I'm just going to be drawing one angle of the fox, but I will show you how you can make different faces by changing up the face shape. So the basic face shape that I'm going to be drawing out for the fox is a hexagon shape, which has 6 sides. Then for the cheeks, I'm going to place some hairs on either side, which is the diagonal lines at the bottom. Then at the bottom half of the face, I'm going to add a small nose with 2 curved lines connecting it to the sides of the face and 2 eyes on top of the curves. Then to finish off, I'm going to draw 2 large ears next to the straight line at the top and adding the mouth, which is a shape of the number 3 facing down. And I'm also going to add some hairs at the bottom of the ears, and those are basically the features that I'm going to incorporate into the face. So to change up the face shape, you can make it wider like the one that I just drew right here, or you can even make it thinner, and this will give a different character to your painting. I'm going to be doing the second one that I drew out, but of course you can customize this however you want. For the body, I'm just going to draw it out sitting sideways, but I will go over it again later on since I will be drawing it out before I paint it. For the body, I prefer to just draw it in this style because the image that I get from a fox is for them to be quite thin and agile, so I'm not going to make this one overly chubby like my other animal paintings, but if that's what you want, you can just add a bit more volume to the legs and the body. I'm drawing the wide face that I drew out before, but remember that you can take the other options too if you want. And before drawing the features, I prefer to draw out the body first just so I like the proportion between the body and the head. So for the body, I like to make a rounded, almost like a right angle triangle because it's in a sitting position, and where the back legs are, I rounded the shape to follow the anatomy of the legs. And for the front legs, I'm going to draw them slightly curved out, and this will make your drawing less stiff by avoiding really straight lines. So any part where you feel needs to be straight in a painting or a drawing, curve them slightly, and this will give it a bit more flow and movement to your drawing. I also made the legs smaller towards the paws, and again I'm going to curve them out slightly, and where the 2 legs connect to the chest area, I just drew out curved jagged lines to represent the fur. Then I added the back legs by drawing out a backward C shape followed by the bottom part of the leg where it's going to rest on the stump. For the tail, you can draw them going up or rested near the legs. I want mine to face upwards, and I'm going to make like a backwards S shape to give it a bit of movement. Then I finished it off by drawing around it to give the tail some volume. Now I'm just going to draw out the face like how I drew them out before, but I'm also making sure as I'm drawing this out, because this is the outline for the painting, I'm cleaning out all of the lines so it won't show through the paint. It's really up to you if you want to use the pencil as an outline, but I'm going to be outlining it with an art liner later on, so I don't want the pencil to dirty the paint. And for the transition between the white and orange for the fur on the face and tail, I don't want mine to be too distinct because I just want to separate those 2 colors with the paint. I'm only going to outline the separation very lightly or not at all, but if you're going to outline that part with an art liner after you paint it, then it should be fine if you draw it out with pencil first. For the stump, I'm going to draw a slightly rounded base. Then for the bottom, I'm going to draw out some large roots. It's important when you draw this part that the lines look a little bit jagged so it still looks natural. I'm just going to go in straight with the colors. So for the fox, I'm going to be using 3 colors, and that's permanent yellow, deep vermilion, and some ivory black. I'm going to mix in the permanent yellow deep with a little bit of vermilion to create a light orange color, and then I'm going to dilute it and make the base color for the tail because I don't want the white area to be completely white, so I'm going to make it a light orange compared to the dark orange for the rest of the fur. I forgot that the paint shows really well on a cold press paper, so I end up absorbing some of it with a bit of tissue, but if that doesn't happen to you, then it's fine, just leave it that way. And while the paint is still slightly wet, I added a bit more vermilion into the mix to create a darker orange, and I use a medium to thick consistency to paint the bottom part of the tail. Where the area of the tail is coming close to where you want the transition to the white fur, I made sure that I made thin strokes, and then I tried to slightly blend it with a little bit of water to soften it up. Then I'm going to continue on with the same color to paint the body, and I'm making sure that I don't paint everything because I'm going straight in with a darker orange, and I want to avoid the area in between the two front legs where the chest and the belly of the fox is going to be white. At this point, I also painted the back legs where it's kind of covered by the front legs, and after that I also layered on top of it with an even darker orange by adding a bit more vermilion into the mix so that I can get a separation between the front legs and the back legs so it doesn't all blend together. Now I'm going to paint the face, and I want to start off by drawing out the curves on either side of the nose to separate the two colors, because there might be a chance of forgetting to separate them if you paint other parts of the face. So I'm going to do this just to be safe. Then I'm going to continue on with the rest of the face. I also left out the inner ears because I want to add a slightly pink color for that part. So for the rest of the white area of the fox, I'm going to clean my brush first and load it with the really diluted orange mix that I used for the foxtail, and then apply it to those areas. To finish off the body, I'm going to add a darker orange and paint it to separate the body parts. So where the head is connecting to the body, I'm going to add a dark orange to give a bit of shadow and separate those two shapes. I'm also going to do the same for the legs because I see that the back legs are blending too much with the tummy area, and I want to separate that by using a darker orange. Next, I'm going to paint the pink for the ears. I already have some pink on my palette, so I'm just going to use that, but you can also use a mix of vermilion and white. And I'm just going to apply it really thinly on the ears because I don't want it to pop out too much. I want it to still recede to the back and for the orange to still pop more than the pink. Next, I'm going to paint the black parts of the fox. So I'm going to take a thick consistency of ivory black, and then I'm going to apply it to the paw area. And I don't want to paint too much of this because I'm going to clean my brush and blend it out to the orange. However, if you like the look of the really contrasting colors between the black and the orange, you can also leave it that way. But I like mine slowly transitioning, so I'm going to blend mine with clean water, and then I'm going to add a darker orange to mix it so the colors in between doesn't look too gray. And then I'm just going to apply the same thing for the ears. I'm going to paint some black at the tip, and then I'm going to blend it with the rest of the orange. But as always, if you like the harsh contrast between the black and the orange, you can also leave it that way. And then I'm going to use the same pink that I used for the ears and give the fox some rosy cheeks. I'm going to paint the stump now, and for this I want to add two colors to my palette, which is burnt sienna and permanent green. I'm first going to use a very thin consistency of the permanent green to wet the surface of the stump, and I switch around now and then with some burnt sienna that's mixed with a little bit of permanent yellow deep. I like these colors to slightly mingle with each other, then I add more burnt sienna, and this time I'm going to use a medium to thick consistency of the color and place some on the wet surface of the stump, whilst leaving out some areas where I'm going to continue with some permanent green to add the base color for moss and grass around the stump. Now I'm going to start applying some permanent green to the stump, and because this is still the base color, you can even place a bit on top of where you've placed some burnt sienna before if you made the mistake of putting it on the base. And where the burnt sienna is starting to dry and is looking a bit lighter, I'm also going to add more of the same color in a thick consistency to bring out the vibrancy. So now I have a slightly blurry stump with the permanent green color and burnt sienna, and I'm just going to let the paint settle while moving on to the details of the plants around the stump. For the leaves that I'm going to be painting on the side, I'm going to mix permanent yellow deep and permanent green together. I also switched to my smaller brush for this because I want to be able to control the shape and details. I'm first just placing the leaves randomly at different angles, placing them different ways, and I want the leaves to be placed until it's around the level of the bottom of the fox face. And once I'm done with the leaves, I'm going to switch to my burnt sienna and paint the branches. I just basically tried to connect the leaves together that I just painted. Then I mixed a bit more permanent yellow deep into the leaf mixture before, and I used a slightly thinner consistency to add more leaves, and using the lighter consistency will help you build a slight depth, so not all the leaves look like they're at the same depth perception. And then for a pop of color, I also cleaned my brush and used vermilion mixed with a tiny bit of ivory black just to darken it by a touch, and I used the color mixture to paint some red berries around the branches. For the left side of the stump, I'm going to mix in some burnt sienna with permanent green, and using this mix I'm going to create a different shape leaves, and this one is teardrop shapes with one at the top and two on either sides, or three on either sides depending on how long you want it to be. And I just piled them on top of each other using the same color. Then adding a bit of ivory black, I connect all the leaves together by painting the branch. And then I also use the same color to paint the midribs of the leaves. Using the same dark green mixture, I'm going to start painting the grass in between the roots of the stump. And then I'm going to mix in a little bit of ivory black into the burnt sienna to create a slightly darker brown, and I'm going to use this mixture to paint some of the bark texture on the stump. I use a thick consistency of the color and I painted uneven lines on the area where the stump is colored brown. While painting the texture, I'm going to avoid the green areas of the stump because I want to paint some moss later on. I also painted the lines in different directions where the roots are so I can define the volume and dimension of the roots. I'm going to use the dark green mix that I used for the grass before, and I'm going to use it to paint the moss texture. And for that, I'm going to use an old frayed brush, and I dot the dark green color using the rough texture of the brush to create the uneven texture of the moss, while the brush is slightly dry. So instead of puddles, you're creating dry brush stroke textures. And then I switched to my smaller brush to get into some of the smaller places that I couldn't with the previous brush. Now I'm going to add some flowers just for decorations on the left hand side. You can use any color, but I'm using the pink that I already have on my palette. And I just paint single brush strokes or two brush strokes, creating sort of like a heart shape. And then I continued on with the dark green to paint the stem of the flowers really lightly. I decided to also add a touch of white gouache into the green mix that I use, which is a mixture of permanent yellow deep and permanent green to paint some of the grass and create a slightly different tone. And then later on, I found that it would be better to cover a lot of the areas with just the green color instead of painting the grass one by one for the whole thing. So I ended up covering the whole space in between the roots with the green, and I tried to paint them unevenly so I can get a nice texture. I also used the same green but in a lighter consistency to paint some of the back, so the back doesn't look too bright compared to the foreground at the stump. And while I wait for that to dry, I'm going to use the same color, and now I'm going to paint some shorter grass in random places just to suggest that that's what the texture of the grass is for the rest of the area. After the wet area is dry, I mix in some ultramarine deep with a touch of vermilion to the green mix, and use the dark green to also paint the short grass texture where the background is already green, so the color would still stand out. To darken the color even more, if the color is not dark enough, I also use some ivory black, and this is how I pile on the layers if the background is already dark, and I just create a darker color to paint on top of it. I'm quite happy with the texture of the grass. So now I want to break up the dark colors by using some white gouache, and I'm going to paint dots to represent the light reflection, and for some of the larger dots I'm going to spread the paint by doing a circular motion to create some dandelions, and I find that the color is fading too much, so I'm going to layer more of the white until I'm happy with the contrast. To unify the painting, I also want to create some dots on the white areas. So for this one, instead of just using the white gouache, I mixed in some permanent yellow deep into the white. So I create a really light pastel yellow, and I'm going to paint tiny dots to represent some light particles. I think I'm done with the stump now. In fact, I think I went a little bit overboard, but I love creating tiny details like that. So now I'm going to go back to the fox and outline it using a thin art liner. The one that I'm using is 0.05, and I'm going to create uneven dashed lines to suggest the fur, and in some areas I'm also going to draw out jagged lines to suggest different lengths of the fur. It's also important to use a waterproof art liner, so if you want to fix or paint anything on top of this later on, the ink from the art liner won't bleed out. Because there are a lot of textures on the stump, I find that the fox is a little bit too plain, so I'm going to use a dark orange mix to first paint the transition of the black to the orange on the legs. Then I'm going to use the same orange color to paint some fur texture by creating small uneven strokes in certain areas. I'm also going to paint some on the head, but I don't want to go too overboard and ruin the face that I already painted, so I just added the fur in this triangular area to frame the face, going around the eyes and towards the nose. So that's it for this one. This is the finished red fox sitting on a stump. I really enjoyed painting this one because of the foliage around the stump area. Anyway, if you're still here, thank you so much for watching till the end. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!